The next chapter this week that we're going to be looking at is Chapter 8, Communication in the Workplace. You look on page 207 in your book, you'll have the learning objectives off to the right-hand side. Describe the formal channels of communication within organizations. Describe the informal channels of communication within organizations. Identify the challenges to interpersonal communication created by communication technology. Be ready to do an effective job of conducting or participating in a business meeting. Again, if you want to look on page 208, 209, we're going to talk about the formal channels of communication within organizations. You have company blogs and social media as formal channels nowadays. Some companies do have a blog that's set up and widely used formally for companies and people in their company to use, kind of like an internal Facebook, where you can talk to other people within the company and you can communicate with those people. You can post things that are happening in your department, and you can see what's happening in someone else's department. The blog, as they state in the PowerPoint, kind of communicates with a soft human touch, because it is a lot like Facebook, only it's only available to company employees. So this type of a company blog is more of a formal channel of communication. Personal blogs about the company is an informal channel of communication. Most companies, if they do have a blog, it's something that's been actually set up through the company, and everyone in the organization is welcome to use it. Social networking websites, intranets, and webinars. 1/2 of all firms use social media to facilitate employees collaborating and sharing information. Most sites have a website. A lot of sites have a page, a corporate page out on Facebook where you can go like it. You can find out more about the company, what's going on, especially, you know, any kind of hospitality or entertainment type organization will normally have a Facebook page out there or a website page that you can go and look at. Obviously, one of the major purposes is to satisfy employee preferences for being connected electronically. Social websites can also be useful in finding mentors throughout the company, and sometimes even mentors that wouldn't be within the company but might be a good mentor for you to have. What is a drawback on a social network? Obviously, social websites can facilitate time wasting. People get lost on kind of the internal Facebook or even the external Facebook, and then they're not accomplishing what they need to do in their position or at their desk. Intranets. An intranet is essentially a company version of an internet, only it's only available to everyone in the company, so only employees can access it. And it's kind of a central place where you can put all kinds of corporate information, and people can go out and look things up. If you needed to see something about, you know, HR policies or whatever, you could go out to the intranet and look that up. We use Alamo Share here at the college in terms of having things stored there. If we want to go into HR and look up a particular procedure, we can do that. If there's other things that you want to look up in other departments, you can go through Alamo Share to be able to do that. It's our version of kind of an intranet, and it, you know, encourages folks to go out and look and see what's happening in the company as well. It should be, if you have one, you should keep updated information on it all the time. So if you're going to put something like that out there in an organization, you need to really make sure that you have the people that will continue to take care and update it as things continue to change. It's only as good as the updated information that's available on it. It can be used for advanced information such as posting motivational messages from the CEO or training messages, or what's happening at the Denver site versus here in Texas. It's a good thing, and most employees like it when they have an intranet because they can access different parts of the company and other employees in big companies that you might not normally be able to. Can have a wiki feature for employee input. Webinars, web-based method for seminar. We have webinars here. In fact, they basically do some of the yearly training through webinars for us here at the college. And then, of course, you always have that ability to go out and join into webinars that are being put on that might be educational webinars or something that you want to join in and see as well. These are all different types of communication that can be found in corporate or organizational environment. Many companies have developed formal communication channels for managing crises such as fires and explosions or terrorist attacks. I know we have some telephone lines that are crisis telephone lines, but to my knowledge we don't really have a communication channel that would be online for that. Our channel would be through the phone. And I think nowadays pretty much everybody has some kind of channel that would allow for formal communication of some kind of major thing happening in the organization. A crucial part of a disaster plan is how to communicate with employees during a crisis, and most organizations have what they call a disaster plan that has been written and is in place, and it's been communicated to everyone so that they're aware of what it is. Multinational companies have made extensive use of intranets and social media to indicate if missing employees are accounted for. And that becomes more of a situation over when you're dealing with, outside of the country in multinational type situations. Communication directions. If you look in your book on page 211, there's a nice little drawing at the bottom there, kind of a flow chart that kind of shows the way communication can be done. Downward communication, which is the flow of messages from basically the top of the organization down, superior to subordinate. Okay, the department manager communicates to the department worker. That is downward communication. The CEO communicates to his director. That is downward communication. Upward communication, messages from the lower levels on the basic org chart actually, go from below to up to higher levels. And this also includes what is called an open door policy if the company has it. And I don't know of any companies that don't. Most companies do have what is called an open door policy. So in the same situation I just gave you, and again on your page 211 in your book, the department worker would actually be the one that would communicate upward from that person's position to the department manager, or the department manager director communicates upward to the CEO. What you need to think about is, would there be good reasons for upward communication? Because sometimes people think of upward communication as an employee coming in to complain about something, and that's not always the case. If you're willing to allow upward communication in your company, sometimes employee level folks have great ideas or think out of the box, and if you allow them to communicate that upward, it may be an idea or something that the company might want to put in place, or that could save the company lots of money. So I think upward communication as well as downward is very important. Open door, if you're not aware of it, is a communication channel that basically allows employees to bring a gripe to top management's attention without first checking with their manager. So, for example, if I have a problem with my manager, I can just go to her director and I don't even have to talk to her about it. I can bypass her to go to her director and talk about what my issues are and what problems I'm having. That is called open door communication. For that matter, I could go to the CEO if I wanted to. Now, keep in mind when you do that, that in some cases you could be making life very hard for yourself and you could be hanging yourself down the road, even though there isn't supposed to be retaliation. Sometimes, you know, it happens in roundabout ways. Basically, if you have a problem with your manager, protocol is to go directly to your manager. Unless, of course, it's something like sexual harassment where you can't really go to your manager on that, or, you know, you feel that your life is being threatened, something so dire that you really need to talk to another manager. But in most cases, protocol is you would give your immediate supervisor or manager an opportunity to address the issue. If they didn't, or you weren't happy with how they were going to address it, then you would go to the next higher level. And that's just giving protocol and the person that you work directly for an opportunity to try to resolve the issue. There's also horizontal communication, messages at the same organizational level. This is a good thing for collaboration. So you would basically have, if you go back to page 211, your department worker communicating with his or her co-worker department worker. That's horizontal communication. And then you have diagonal communication, which is messages that are sent to higher or lower organization levels, only in different compartments. So if I am the department worker in Department A, I could very well send a message to the department manager in Department B, which isn't my manager, but which is a manager of another department. That is what we would call diagonal. Again, there's a nice little kind of flow chart of this on page 211 in your book. We're now on page 213. And we're going to start talking about informal channels of communication within the organization. Basically what that means is these are unofficial networks of channels that supplement, in some cases, the formal channels. And the first one that is talked about, perhaps the most useful aspect of informal channels, is the ability to network with contacts and keep in touch with people outside of the formal channels. That's probably the primary factor of having informal channels within an organization, and that's how they develop. Communities of practice are informal employee networks, and again, I'm on page 213 in your book. They are inexpensive and efficient vehicles for specialists to share knowledge and ideas. Okay, communities of practice, it's an informal network, but we have the same interests, possibly the same job in the organization, only maybe I'm located in Denver, you're located in California, and we have someone in Britain. We can all talk through this and talk about best practices or things that we're doing that we've had success with or haven't had success with and what we did. But basically, we're all practicing our specialty in the same area, and then we're sharing ideas and or innovation with each other. The shadow organization and social network analysis. All companies have hidden shadow organizations where, according to the book, much of the work gets done. And basically, it's, you know, for example, in firms there are tech fixers who supplement but do not replace the technical support center. These are kind of networks within the company that kind of have just been established with workers that have some of the expertise, or they may not be in an IT group, but they are someone that could fix the problem without having to go with IT, if that makes sense. Social network analysis reveals links among workers and who trusts whom when they need for advice. Okay, the mapping and measure of relationships among people, groups, and organizations. And basically, again, the definition for these are on page 213 in your book. Social network analysis helps management survey maps of the informal interactions among employees, and also allows them to look at maybe innovative ideas that are out there, but not out there through formal channels of communication. If you look at page 214, that's where you'll see the figure that's now on the slide. And basically, this is a basic unit of social network analysis. Okay, and you basically look at, you have a credit team member, and then you have all these different people that kind of link to each other. Okay, and they exchange ideas, they go to each other for advice. They will basically go to someone where they need a quick decision. And it's kind of, if you look in the book, they kind of cover these other people. Whom do you go for a quick decision? Whom do you hang out with socially? Who do you turn to for advice? Who do you go to with a good idea? Whom do you go to for career advice? That's kind of what the social network is within the organization and how it develops. And it's different to each individual because obviously they link to different people. You may want to take a look at the quiz on page 215, the strength of my network of contacts. This is again, interesting and insightful, just how big is your network of contacts. And if you don't have a big one, it's something you may want to work on, because it's always good to have a ongoing network. You keep some of the people in it, but it's always good to continue to grow your network, because you never quite know when you might need these people for different things in your life. And certainly if you ever need to switch jobs or find a job, a lot of times your network contacts can be very helpful in helping you find a new job or get into a job that you would prefer to be doing than the current job you're in. The next thing the book mentions about informal channels of communication is the grapevine. Now, we've all heard about this in any kind of major organization. It is a channel of communication that's out there, and it kind of, you know, talks about things that are happening, but not everything. It's based off of some truth, like there's a reorganization coming down, but then the pathways as to how this is going to happen and what's going to happen kind of get tangled, so that you're not always sure that what you hear on the grapevine is actually 100% the truth. But it normally does start from some type of factual data, and then as it continues to, you know, be passed on and passed on, the message can get tangled sometimes, or you don't get entirely true statement of what's going on. A game that you used to play as a kid kind of reminds me of this. It used to be called the telephone game, and you would, you know, start a message by whispering it in someone's ear at the far side of the class, and then they would turn around and whisper it into the next person's ear, and you could only whisper it once, so you had to really pay attention and listen, and it would go all through the class, and by the time it got to the other end and that person stated the message, it wasn't quite exactly the message that had started out. That's kind of how a grapevine works. There are some strengths and some good things about a grapevine, but keep in mind that not everything you hear is 100% accurate. And a lot of times you do hear things on the grapevine a lot quicker than you do through the formal channels of communication within an organization. Rumors. Rumors are, and I'm on page 216, are important informal communication force within organizations, and there's usually at least a good 2 or 3 that are out there. The problem with that is, in many cases, you know, an inaccurate rumor can sometimes, cause a distraction in the workplace, depending on what that rumor is. If there's an inaccurate rumor out there that the company is looking to lay off 200 people, and that gets out to everybody, then you're going to have people worried about whether they're going to have a job coming in tomorrow. Okay, so you have to be, again, careful about rumors. And rumors are usually the types of things that sometimes you hear on the grapevine. Maybe they are going to look at laying off people, but maybe it's not 200, and maybe it's not at this plant. Maybe it's international, or but you don't have all the facts. So that's part of the problem, as with any rumor, even in your own life. Rumors are usually distorted and not necessarily factual. Again, if you look at the slide, the grapevine, the major informal communication channel in organizations, because it is pretty big, even though it's informal, it does carry mostly negative gossip and rumors, but it can also be used for positive things that get passed along on it. Did you know that so-and-so is celebrating their 30 years with the company and they're having a big party up on floor 11 at noon? These kind of things. And also, it does pick up, like I said, some factions of truth. If there's going to be a reorganization, you'll probably hear it on the grapevine. Now, will you have all the facts and all the correct information? Probably not. But you'll probably hear that something is brewing in terms of a reorganization before you start seeing formal postings through the formal communication channels. Rumors are important informal communication force within the organizations, and they thrive in organizations with poor formal communications, which would make sense. The poorer the company and the organization is at communicating, the more gossip, the more rumors, the more going back and forth behind people, behind closed doors, at someone's desk. That's going to happen when people aren't being communicated to. They're going to come up with what they think is going on versus what is really going on. So keep that in mind. Rumors can also be very negative things depending on what the rumor is that's going around in a company, and you need to be very, very careful. If you are a spreader of rumors, or you hear one and you spread it, particularly if it involves people, my advice is not to become part of the rumor mill and spread the rumor, because if it is something that is maligning a person and they find out, there could be serious consequences for you and or whoever started the rumor to begin with. Chance encounters and management by walking around. This is actually something we talk about a leadership class as a great way to learn about your people and learn a little more about them and talk to them, is to manage by walking around and mingling with the workers or the customers. A lot of times when you do that, you hear different things, the employees tell you different things, so you pick up some valuable information. A lot of times you'll learn that there is a rumor out there and all your employees are aflutter about what this rumor is, and then when you find out, you can calm them all down and say, no, that's not true, that's not what's happening, and you can give them the true picture. So again, management by walking around is not only good if you're a leader, but it is good in terms of communication as well. And again, we are on page 216 and 217. Open workspaces and informal communication. Architectural approach to enhancing informal communications in organizations is to make use of open office space. Okay, you have workspace in manufacturing plants or construction plants, and sometimes this open space can enhance collaboration and creativity and increase formality. People tend to gather sometimes in these open spaces, and they'll maybe work on a problem together, or they'll talk about something together or collaborate because they have the room and they have the space to do it. Sometimes workers, like in a manufacturing plant, they don't even have their own cubicle or desk. They have these open space work areas where if they're wanting to do something or wanting to collaborate, they get the other person they want to collaborate with and they do it just out there in the open on the manufacturing floor. Again, this is purposely done with the intent of positive informal communication to, help employees be creative, enhance that collaboration that may happen between people when they can work in that kind of environment. What's a drawback? Obviously, it violates need for privacy and to work without distractions of other people. It's very hard if you want to make a personal phone call to your doctor to set something up. You can't really do it. You're going to need to step outside. Or if HR calls you and they want to talk about something, everybody can hear you when you're in an open space working location. So there are some drawbacks, but again, I really believe it also depends on the type of business, and I see it more when I've been out to manufacturing plants, because these are people that are on the floor working certain parts, basically of the line that's going through, and there really isn't room for cubicles out on the floor. But there are these spaces where you have these workspaces where people can gather and collaborate if they need to on issues or problems that come up during the manufacturing phase. Email and communication among people. Okay, and that is going to be on 218. You may want to take a look at Human Relations in Practice on 217 and 18. Pharmaceutical giant GSK uses collaborative workspaces. It gives you a little more detail on their open office design and how it has worked for them. To go back to email and communicating among people, again, the technology is great, but it does, in some cases, create interpersonal challenges for some of us. And the problem in many cases with email and or texting is that people sometimes don't think when they send a message. You can't see a person's face, you can't see the person and their body language, so you don't know how they are perceiving the message you're sending, how that's coming across, and if they are actually getting the right impression that you wanted to leave. Plus, there are people that do crazy things like sending an email in all red letters and all capitalized, which comes across as screaming to somebody. And so you want to be very careful when you email, exactly to say exactly what you mean. I use email more of a follow-up type of a thing. If I have a face-to-face, then I'll follow up with an email. Or if I have a telephone conversation, I'll follow up with an email, just to make sure that we walked away with the same understanding of whatever we talked about. Indiscriminate message sending. The number of messages received can be overwhelming in email. Okay, some people, they're busy, but people just email. And then there's the people that do the reply all on an email that went out to everybody, but that really you just need to reply to the sender, but they'll hit reply all, and then everybody will get everybody's reply on the question that was out there, when you really don't need that. And just because they're not thinking when they hit it, or they don't look, so you're going to see everybody's response back to the manager on the question that was asked, because everybody's hitting reply all, which then just puts a ton more messages into your email. And I know you've all been there, because we've been there, and you're like, really? Why don't you just hit reply? Why are you doing reply all? We don't all need to see this response. So too much informality. Sometimes emails are written in an unprofessional style, in all red in caps, comes across as you're yelling at somebody. Sometimes people will write an email as though they are texting someone, and they'll use the same texting abbreviations, which makes it very informal. And again, you have to remember who your audience is. Not everybody knows the texting abbreviations that are used today when they text. And it also depends on the message you're trying to deliver. If you're talking to your manager, you want to make sure that email is a little more formal. Unfortunately, with email around, if you want to avoid somebody, you can, okay? Because you can talk to them through email, and you never have to confront them face to face. In fact, nowadays, which I don't agree with, but people have actually been fired through email, which to me is not the way to take care of letting somebody go, but it happens, okay? People don't want to deal with the conflict of having to terminate. People don't want to reprimand someone face to face, and therefore they do it over an email. Well, I'm here to tell you, from a leadership standpoint, that is not how you want to deal with conflict. If you're having problems with a person, you need to bring them into the office and you need to talk to them face to face, not through an email. Alternatives to email: focus on enhancing collaboration by reducing the need to send so many emails to a long list of people. I know people that will email the person in the cube next to them, and they could just stand up and walk over there, and I mean literally like 2 feet. And still they'll email them. A lot of companies have IM, where it's an instant messaging type of a program, where, if I don't feel like getting up, I can just, IM the person in the cube next to me to ask them, what are you doing for lunch? You want to go out? Whatever the case may be. But we do rely a lot on the technology, and we've gotten away in some cases from the face-to-face. And that's not always necessarily good, especially depending on the message you're trying to deliver. Again, we're on page 220 and 221. You may want to look at email messaging and etiquette in figure 8-3 on 220. Kind of talks about what you should do, what you shouldn't do in an email to make it an effective use of the technology. On page 221, use presentation technology to your advantage in terms of PowerPoints and or anything Prezi, any of the things that you would use to present. Reveal the points only as needed. You want to make sure, if you're going to use any technology like that to communicate, that you're talking to the audience, you're not relying on the screen. PowerPoint slides of any sort are always used to enhance your presentation. They shouldn't be your presentation. You should know what you're presenting. They're used to bullet point thoughts or ideas that you would expand upon and kind of keep you on track as to where you're going in the organizational order of how you want to present. But you shouldn't have like 3 paragraphs written on a slide and then you're standing in the back and you're reading it word for word from the slide. That's not the intent of any kind of presentation technology. Keep the slide in view until the audience gets the point. Make sure, especially if you're in any kind of an instruction mode, that if people are taking notes, you allow that slide to stay up there a little bit longer so that they can write down the steps or whatever may be on the slide. You want to minimize the text. You shouldn't really have more than 6 bulleted items on a slide, and I mean 1 line bulleted. So if you have something that's a long bullet, you need to count those lines. And always, 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 you want to check your presentation for spelling errors. We say it, and yet so many people have typos or spelling errors. What's even better is have someone proof it for you. Because when it's something you've been working on a long time, you don't always see the errors when you're reading it, because your mind knows what you want to say, so it goes right over the typo or the error. So it's always good to have someone else proof it, especially if it's a major presentation that you're going to be given either to a customer or maybe to the CEO and the VPs. You would really want to make sure that you don't have spelling and grammar errors in the presentation. And most of the software these days comes with spell checks and and things that you can run to help you identify those things. Now, however, if you use the wrong word but it's spelled correctly, it's not going to catch something like that, which is why you probably would want someone to proof it. Additional ways to communicate in an organization: you have the telephone, you have voicemail, you have speakerphones. You want to make sure when you're on the telephone or you're leaving a voicemail message, and certainly when you're on a speakerphone, but definitely that you vary your voice and your inflection, okay, especially if you're talking to a customer, that you smile while you're speaking. In fact, they tell you this in a call center environment. When you pick up the phone, you smile, because that smile can be felt through the phone by the customer that you're talking to. You want to avoid multitasking, particularly if you're talking to a customer or a coworker or manager that is calling you because they need you to do something, or they're going to want some additional information from you, so that you really are paying attention to what's being asked for. You certainly don't want to be munching while you're on the phone. Aside from being rude, it's just really not what you want to be doing. If you're in the middle of eating, then swallow your bite and then pick up the phone, but don't pick up the phone with a full mouthful of food. Avoid offending customers by inappropriate use of smartphones. Explain that you're using the smartphone to access relevant information, if that's indeed what you're doing. You just really want to be careful. A lot of times I'll have people leave me a voicemail message and I can't understand it. And I can't understand it because they didn't speak loud enough, they didn't speak clearly, or they spoke too fast or mumbled through it, and then they leave the number, and no matter how many times I turn it up and play it over, I can't understand what number they're saying is the callback number. So you want to make sure that you're very clear, that you pause, so that whatever message you're leaving, you know, the person can really get and will be able to call you back. Now, when you're using a speakerphone, which are great, particularly if you're doing any kind of a conference call, you do need to be aware of the fact, though, that if the speakerphone is at your desk and you're in a working environment and you're going to conference into a conference call, that you may be having this speakerphone on, you may be bothering all those around you that are trying to work. So in some cases, it may be better to get, you know, a conference room and take your call in there in the speakerphone, where you're not really upsetting the status quo, because everybody can hear the conference call and what's going on with it. Or, you know, if you're just listening in to the conference call and you're not really going to be speaking or saying much, then at least mute it. So that the people in the conference call can't hear the background noises where you're at, and also you know, pick up the headset so that, you know, the people around you aren't hearing the conference call. Okay, we're on page 225. I do want to just mention before we go to this slide, it talks a little bit about telecommuting in the remote workforce. For those of you that aren't aware, a telecommuter is a person who works at home or at another site than the main location. Sometimes full-time, sometimes part-time, sometimes a mix. They're in the office 2 days, they're at home 3 days. It just depends on the company and what their procedure policy is on telecommuting, and as well the position of the person. So it's, again, what happens when you telecommute sometimes is these people get left out of the loop of any of the communications that are going on. So, you know, if you have telecommuters in your organization, make sure that you keep them as informed as you keep the rest of your group, because they're not going to necessarily be privy to things like the informal communication channels at the company, because they're not in the office all the time. All right, so the book talks about, on page 223, an analysis of 46 studies involving close to 13,000 employees found many important advantages of telecommuting. Remote workers tend to be more productive and are less likely to quit, have higher job satisfaction than those who spend the entire work week in the office. Employees gain the most benefits from telecommuting when managers grant them flexibility on when and how they work from home and another location. It's a great thing. I used to manage a group of project managers that were remote, some in-state, some out-of-state, but it's got to be the right person in that position. Some people cannot work in that unstructured of an environment. They really need to be the type of person that comes into the office, that has a desk, that has to work from the desk, because they cannot structure themselves, if not in that environment, to get done what they need to get done. So it's not for everybody, but I do know that when you are telecommuting, people tend to forget about you because you're not in the office all the time. So you want to make sure, especially if you're a leader or if one of your coworkers is a telecommuting person, that they are kept in the touch and communication is kept up with these people as well, and they know what's going on in the group, in the company, whatever, because I think sometimes people tend to forget they're there because they're just not in the office on a day-to-day basis. The picture that's on the screen right now you can find on page 225, and it's basically talking about basically multitasking is what this goes into. Do you take this woman to be your wholly wedded wife? Hold on a second, I just received a message from my boss on my BlackBerry. Okay, so, you know, basically he's trying to multitask while he's getting married. And sometimes you need to watch that multitasking, because when you do that, as you know, that is a form of noise when you're trying to communicate with somebody. It's a distraction, and you're not going to hear or communicate as well as you can when you're trying to do 3 other things, and we all do it. You know, sometimes you got the headset on your shoulder and you're listening or you're talking, but you're typing away on your computer doing something else. That would be a benefit of multitasking, but because you're going to get something done. But there are also some negatives to multitasking, so you need to really watch that. Also, what happens now with technology being so heavily available to us all the time, that there becomes really a blur between our personal life and our work life unless we make it. Because now people can reach you anywhere, anytime. Work can reach you wherever from your phone. So you need to be real careful and make sure that you know, you do draw those lines when you go home, unless you are in such a position that you have to be available, that you make sure that you take that time off and you're not as connected to the office as you would be during the 8, 10, 12 hours that you're there. This next slide is going to talk a little bit more about what I talked about with telecommuting in the remote workforce. Advantages of telecommuting per the research that was done: higher productivity, lower turnover, higher job satisfaction. This works really well too if you have an employee that's a very good employee, but let's say they commute in from an hour and a half to 2 hours every day. You might want to give them that allowance to telecommute and work out of the office, if not all the time, at least a few days a week. You probably would be really surprised over the difference that will make for that person and their performance within the organization. What can happen when you telecommute was kind of what I talked about: interpersonal communication problems, less face-to-face interaction, and you're isolated from the office, so you don't always know the buzz and what's going on in the office, and people forget to tell you. Sometimes just people forget you're just out there if they don't actually work with you on a daily basis. The characteristics of a successful telecommuter: of course, you have to be self-disciplined and you have to be able to work in isolation. Not everybody can do that. Some people like to have people around them. Their character is that of a social character. They don't do well in an isolated environment where it's just them. They do better where they have people around. And you definitely have to be self-disciplined, because you got to make sure that, you know, you don't just do whatever all day long except your work. You got to get up and you got to do your work on a daily basis. The multitasking movement. Many workers use multiple computer monitors. I'm one of those. I have 2 computer monitors, so that, you know, I can have something up on one screen and be typing something on the other screen, and maybe even cutting and pasting from one screen to another screen. And I love it. I remember when I first got it, I didn't think I would, but I do love it, and it makes a big difference. I don't have that set up at home, and I'm always wanting to be able to just move over to my second monitor and grab something and bring it into my first monitor. So for me, I've adapted very well to using the dual monitors and being able to do twice as much work between the 2 of them. Multitasking is a way of life for many Generation Y members, okay, or the millennials. They're used to it. I mean, think about it. You know, they're doing their homework, they're texting somebody, okay? They got their headset in and they're listening or watching something on their phone, and they're doing something else. They kind of grew up just doing that. They're so hooked into their phone and texting, or the technology through the phone, that they do other things and really in some cases never unhook or unplug. The benefits, of course, of multitasking can increase productivity as long as it's done with a quality process. 2 tasks can be done at once. Now, if you're in a hurry and you're just multitasking and you're not putting out quality work, then it becomes a performance issue. You can feel more productive by accessing email messages while seated at a meeting, although, you know, that can also be perceived as rude and not paying attention in the meeting, depending on, you know, who called the meeting and what the meeting is about. You definitely can be accessing your email while you're listening to voicemail messages on the phone. But again, I ask you, how tuned in are you if you're reading something else and concentrating on what's being said there while you're trying to listen to a message that someone left you on the phone? The cognitive problems associated with multitasking, only about 2.5% of the population do it well, okay? It usually lowers accuracy and productivity instead of doing the opposite, because people are multitasking. They make mistakes. When they make mistakes, it's got to go back and be redone. That affects your productivity. It's particularly bad for complex or demanding tasks. Well, I would agree with that. You really need, if it's a complex or demanding task, you really need your full attention on it. The average worker loses about 2.1 hours per day of productivity because of electronic interruptions. And this costs the U.S. economy about $997 billion annually. Who would have thought, right, that it would cost that much? What are some of the consequences? It breaks down the distinction between work and personal life, because now you can do everything anywhere, okay? Because you can multitask at home, you could be working on something from work and doing something of yours, and vice versa in the workplace if you wanted to. It could enhance productivity because you can respond to a work problem at any given time. However, you know, again, if you're multitasking while you're responding to that work situation, what's to say you're responding in a quality manner, okay? It does affect interpersonal relationships, okay? Because you're busy multitasking, you're not actually working with a group or brainstorming with a group or talking to another group. It doesn't necessarily foster collaboration, all right? And you know, one of the other things, and this happens a lot, it's impolite to access electronic devices while talking to other people, and I see it happen all the time. Okay, I mean, you could be talking to someone and, you know, they'll hear a bing and you know it's a text, and they'll take out their phone and they'll look at it. Again, I ask you, how closely is that person listening to you and what you're talking about if they're doing that? And they couldn't wait the 2 seconds till you finish to look at that text message. To me, it's also kind of rude. Overconfidence in computer-generated data. Many people regard computerized data as infallible, and therefore we've become reliant on it because it's computerized. As you see in point B, the reality is the data is only as good as the people that input it into the computer. So the humans that are entering the data, in many cases, they're human, and humans can make errors. So the data, again, is only as good as what is input. So don't always think if something is really, really off that, you know, oh no, this can't have any mistakes in it. This has to be exactly correct because it's computerized data. In most cases, someone puts that data in, and then they pull the reports from that data. So always keep that in mind. It's not always 100% accurate. It depends on who is inputting it. And as long as you have human intervention, you will have the possibility of human error. Communication problems occur because a person who uses the computerized data will not listen to your problem or challenge. They go by the data, and again, the data may not be correct. Okay, so it's important to understand, you know, these are all things that are barriers or have problems with communication in a workplace, particularly this situation. But a lot of these things, some of these things will apply outside the workplace to people you're dealing with or working with or your family. The next part of this chapter goes into doing an effective job of conducting or participating in a business meeting. And there are not people that do this very well. And in fact, here at the college, in most cases, they're pretty bad at it. You're invited to meetings. You don't really know what you're meeting for. There is no agenda. There is no note taker. Even if action items are discussed, no one writes that down. There's no follow-up. It kind of defeats the purpose of having a meeting, because then 6 months go by and we have another meeting. We're right back where we started. Nothing ever got done. And I'm sure some of you have been in these kind of meetings. So it's important to understand when you're having a meeting, certainly if you are the one conducting it, okay, why are you calling the meeting and what is the outcome? What do you want to accomplish? And you should only be calling meetings for a valid reason to get something done, not just to call meetings. I mean, I used to have the boss that would call a meeting every week because he just felt he should have team meetings. Well, if we didn't have any updates or input, what are we all doing sitting here in the team meeting looking at each other? So it's really important that you understand why you're calling the meeting, what you want to get out of the meeting, and it should be some valid business reason for having it. You always want to set a start and a stop time. Okay? You want to offer refreshments, definitely, if you have customers coming into this meeting. There needs to at least be water available to your customers if they're coming in. A long time ago, there used to always be some type of a refreshment, particularly in long meetings. But nowadays, with people cutting back expenses, you don't see that as often. People will bring their own coffee or, you know, their own Diet Coke or whatever to the meeting with them. You always want to do an agenda, and the agenda needs to be sent out ahead of time, and you need to determine who your members are ahead of time, and you want those members to be people that are critical to helping the outcome that you want from this meeting. This is not just invite everybody and their brother. Sometimes I get invited to meetings and I'm like, why am I here? I have no input into this, and I don't have the decision-making decision that could change whatever. Why did I get invited? So you want to make sure you have the right players in place, or you're going to be wasting time. Once you put your agenda together, that agenda should also include timing for the meeting, a start and stop time. You know, if it's an hour-long meeting, if it's a 2-hour-long meeting, You need to watch how long your meetings go, because keep in mind, after a while, you start to lose people. All right, you want to keep your comments brief and to the point. If you're running the meeting, you want to make sure that other people keep their comments brief and to the point. Some people go off on tangents and then a whole nother discussion begins. You need to bring them back in, reel them in, okay, to the point of the meeting and keep it on track. You do want to encourage others to speak. You want feedback, you want commentary, because obviously you called the meeting for a purpose, and you called these people in because you either want their ideas or their feedback, their permission, whatever the case may be. So you do want to make sure that everybody within the meeting is participating during the meeting. And again, the agenda should go out before the meeting, but because some people don't bring it with them to the meeting, I would also make some copies to bring with me to the meeting as well. Again, we're on page 226 and 227. This is, consider huddling when a quick action is needed. Could there be a stand-up meeting? If you need to make a quick decision, instead of calling a formal meeting, can you not maybe get in an open space in your area and call the people in, and you just stand there and talk about what quickly has to be cited? Or if they're not there, maybe gather 2 or 3 people in your office, conference in the other 2 or 3 people, and try to quickly make a decision in a huddle when it's something that you can't really do a formal meeting for, and a decision has to be made like now. Okay, something that is very fast-paced. You want to just pull some people together, really basically say what's going on. Particularly this would happen more when you're putting out fires, something's going wrong in a project, because you don't have the time to call a formal meeting in many cases. So you also want to make sure during your meeting that somebody is taking notes, and that any action items that are assigned to anyone in that meeting are written down. And after the meeting minutes and the action items are sent to everybody that attended that meeting, and the dates of when those action items are to be completed. Because that's another thing, when you do assign action items in a meeting, you want to put some kind of a date onto it. When are you expecting this to be completed? You don't want to just say so-and-so's going to take care of it. They could be taking care of it for the next 3 years. So you do want to put some kind of a date on it, and you really want to do meeting minutes. People forget. They're called into meetings all the time. They forget that they may have an action item. You want to send out those meeting minutes with action items and dates, as well as if you have already planned on having a follow-up meeting, what that date would be as well. You want to try to minimize distractions during the meeting as much as possible. That's where I said you don't want someone checking their email. You don't want someone texting someone. You don't want someone on the phone. I mean, you need to kind of lay down some meeting rules when you first get in there so people know you're serious and we don't want to be in this meeting forever, so we're going to go through the points, we're going to make the decisions, and then hopefully we'll get this all done in the next hour and move forward. And you can, you can pretty much suggest the guidelines when you get in there. So for the next hour, if you'd all please make sure that you have your cell phones off or on silent, that you're not texting someone because I really need your full attention. You'll want to go through that if it's, again, depending on the topic or why you're calling the meeting. But the important thing is you need an agenda, and you need meeting minutes and action items that are typed up and written and sent out to everybody that was in the meeting. And that you invite only the people that are the decision makers or have the knowledge or are the ones that need to be in the meeting at the meeting. Those are kind of the really important things regarding having meetings. That kind of brings us to the end of chapter 8. Obviously, they give you more detail in the book on page 226 and 27. I suggest you read through it. Again, on page 228, the summary review is in there, and it's very nicely done, talking about the points that we covered. So I would take a look at that as well, certainly before your quiz this week. You might want to run through it. And that is it for Chapter 8.